Hey everyone, today we are going to be talking about methods of working when it comes to painting, and is it best to work section to section or is it best to work the whole canvas at one time? If you've ever seen any of my process videos, you probably know that I work from section to section, and I am constantly getting questions and comments from people just asking why I do this, why I work section to section, but also people who say that they just have no idea how I work that way and that their brain just does not work in that method. Although I did go to art school, I did not study painting, but I do know that a lot of art educators encourage people or teach people to work the entire canvas at once. But I definitely believe that so much of it is just kind of up to personal preference. But today we're gonna just break things down into the pros and cons so that you can kind of decide for yourself. I personally follow many artists who work the entire canvas at once, and I also follow a lot of artists who work section to section like I do. And one thing that I have noticed is that artists who tend to work section by section are very often artists who strive to achieve either very, very high levels of realism or hyperrealism. And this here brings us to our first pro for working section to section, which is that working section to section kind of allows you to break a composition down into small areas so that you can really kind of focus on detail and precision. When I'm trying to figure out my approach to a certain painting, I will typically take a look at my reference. I will find whatever is the furthest thing back that you can see in the composition. Typically this is the sky or just something really, really far in the background, and that's where I start. So that's gonna be the first layer that I do, and then once that layer is done, I'll move on to the next. And pretty much I will just mentally break my reference down into layers and work from the background to the foreground, and eventually the painting will be complete. Once I've worked my way forward and the whole canvas is covered, I might have a few little things that I do at the end. Like I might have some things that I glaze or some just final details that I add. But by that point, my painting is usually kind of 95% complete, and it's just very small details and small finishing touches that I will add at the end. One of the cons that I find to working section to section is that it can be difficult to maintain color consistency throughout your entire piece, your entire canvas, when you're only working on small areas at one time. Throughout time, if you look kind of where I began when I first started painting, I think my color accuracy has significantly improved, and I'm now able to kind of mix colors that almost exactly match what I have on the canvas already. But if you are working on a layer, perhaps like a sky or something that is needs to be blended a lot, has a lot of kind of color transitions that are very smooth, that is a layer that I will try to do in one go so I can blend everything out. Because once that dries, for me, I find that it's really, really hard to put a layer on top of that and kind of match it accurately without covering it completely. And that is going to bring us to our first advantage to working the entire canvas at once, which is when you're working the whole canvas at once, it typically will help you create a very cohesive, kind of harmonious color palette across your entire composition. But for me personally, I find working the entire canvas at once to be very overwhelming and just kind of also mentally challenging to push through the ugly phases of a painting. When you're working section to section, even if you only have like 10 to 15% of the painting complete, typically whatever you have on the canvas is always going to look really, really nice and very detailed. As opposed to working the whole canvas at once, you really have to be able to kind of push through the ugly phase, trust the process, and just trust your vision for the completed painting. And I find that to be something that is just really challenging for me to do. My brain does not like to work that way. A couple of additional things to keep in mind when determining what method of painting is going to be best for you is, number one, how large is your canvas? Typically with smaller canvases, it's going to be a lot easier and less overwhelming to work all at once, as opposed to a very large canvas that might be really difficult to get one layer down that covers the whole thing. Thing number two to keep in mind is how detailed is your composition. I've had references in the past that were very architectural, they were very, very detailed, And for me, breaking things down section to section really allowed me to kind of focus on one small area at a time, kind of approach those details, just take it one step at a time. And to me, I think it's a lot less overwhelming to work that way, and it's a much easier approach to kind of high detailed references. The third and final thing that I would recommend to keep in mind when thinking about what method will work best for you is just kind of what overall look are you going for. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you are striving for either high levels of realism or hyperrealism, then working section to section might be something that is more beneficial to you. Whereas if you kind of want a looser, more painterly look, then you might want to go with the working the entire canvas method. But yeah, that's about everything that I have. Try it out both ways. Maybe like choose a painting, choose a very small painting, try it both ways and see what works best for you. Personally, I think ultimately, whatever you are more comfortable with, whatever works best for your brain, that's where you are going to find more success. So give it a try. I hope this was helpful, and more tutorials to come. Thanks.